If you're trying to teach a child who doesn't want to learn, whether it be in the classroom, at the kitchen table, or them in school refusing for a long period of time, this video is for you. These young people are doing anything but schoolwork. They're gaming for hours or watching YouTube. They're outside endlessly playing and avoiding anything that looks like learning. They're on their bed exhausted. They're scrolling. They're zoned out or shut down. They're doing all they can just to get through the day, or they're completely disengaged. From the outside looking in, this could look like laziness or bad behavior. But if this is ongoing, it could actually be more about low confidence, overwhelm, or self-protection. If this sounds familiar, stay with me, because what I'm going to do in this video is show you what actually helps when learning is shut down. I'm Brendan, and I've spent years working as a guidance counsellor, working with young people who have disengaged, working with teachers and leadership teams, helping them understand what's happening and how to build around it. And now work with parents, some of whom never expected to be in this position, trying to support learning when the usual systems haven't actually worked. I'm really trying to grow the channel as part of my mission to help as many parents as possible, especially those with neurodiverse kids. So it would really help if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. What I'm discussing today isn't just theory, it's what actually works when learning has stopped. One of the most common things adults say to disengage young people is, you need this for your future. You need this for high school. You'll need this one day for a job. Here's the problem. Once a child's fully disengaged, all of that future-based motivation, it completely goes away. It seems way too far off. What they're responding to is how learning feels right now. For many neurodiverse or school-distressed children, learning has just come to feel like pressure, constant correction, failure, being behind, or being watched or judged. So when we're trying to explain that learning matters for one day in the future, what they actually hear is that you don't understand how this feels for me right now. That's not refusal, that's self-protection. When a child won't engage in learning, it's easy to assume they don't care. In reality, disengagement usually sits on one of these three foundations. Learning feels too hard. The cognitive or emotional load is already too high. They genuinely feel like they just can't do the work. Learning feels unsafe. Mistakes feel humiliating. Effort feels risky. Learning is meaningless right now. Not because they think learning has no value, but because they can't access it while they're just feeling overwhelmed. These young people have often had really bad experiences with school, sometimes even traumatic. This is why many of these same children can master complex games, memorize rules and systems, hyperfocus on interests, and build, design, and problem solve. The capacity for learning hasn't disappeared. The conditions for learning have just collapsed. This next part's especially for the parents who are homeschooling their children and learning's happening outside the normal schooling system. For many of these families, this wasn't a preference. It was a protective decision. There was no choice. And that decision often comes with an enormous invisible load. You've become the teacher, the planner, the motivator, the regulator, and often the only person holding learning together. When learning isn't working, this can be a real struggle. It can feel like it's all on you. Parents will often say things to me like, if I can't make this work, there's no backup. I don't feel like I have anyone to hand this off to. Or, I feel like I'm failing them. When learning becomes tightly tied to the parent-child relationship, resistance often increases. Not because the child's oppositional, but because the stakes suddenly feel so much higher. The schoolwork puts a strain on the child's most important relationship. So the work here is not about trying harder. It's about changing the way that learning shows up in your relationship. This is where many families can turn this around. Not by becoming more structured or stricter, by stepping out of the role of enforcer of learning and back into the role of a guide or leader. When parents shift from, we're going to do this, to, I'm here to rebuild learning with you, the child feels the difference. And that's when learning starts to reopen. When a child's really disengaged, we don't restart learning by teaching more content. We restart learning by rebuilding trust in the process. That almost always starts really small. It's not about the curriculum, it's not about benchmarks, it's not about catching up the work. You need to start with something that the child is willing to stay with. It's important to listen to their voice here. What will they focus on? That might be gaming, ball sports, animals, mechanics, building, music, maps, coding. At this stage, the question isn't about what should they be learning. It's what can they engage in without distress. That's where learning restarts. Let's say a child who does refuse formal learning is willing to learn a new ball sport. That is learning. Make sure you encourage this and really spell out with them how they're learning and growing as a person. From there, the teaching happens quietly. You might read where the sports come from, learn about teams or athletes, watch footage, notice patterns, keep scores or statistics, measure the distance or time or improvement, or write dot points, captions, or short reflections. Reading happens, writing happens, maths happens, critical thinking happens. But the child doesn't feel forced. They feel capable. And that's what brings learning back online. You celebrate each step with them and rebuild their confidence and self-worth. This is the framework I've used with schools and families. Engage, extend, link, generalize. Engage in something the child willingly does. Extend by adding another layer. Link it to another skill. Generalize so the skills begin to transfer. What I mean by generalizing is find a way so the skill can be used in more than one place, not just where it feels easiest. This works in classrooms, at home, and after long periods of disengagement because it works with the child, not against them. Many parents carry a lot of fear here. Some parents ask me questions like, what if my child just can't catch up? What if it's too late for them? My honest answer is that this is definitely not too late. Things can change. I work with young people all the time who have been in school for years and been really disengaged, or they've been just completely out of school, not attending. They can catch up. It doesn't happen overnight. It does take a lot of work, but I've seen it happen time and time again. Things can improve. Sometimes things can snap back faster than any of the adults ever imagined. When we take away the overwhelm, the lack of confidence, all those unmet needs, and they feel safe again, progress can actually be accelerated. So if your child seems years behind, please hear this. They're not lazy, they're not broken, they're not unreachable. They're overwhelmed, and overwhelm is reversible. You don't teach a child who doesn't want to learn by just pushing them harder. You teach them by rebuilding safety, trust, and success, one small step at a time. Learning restarts when the child believes that they can succeed. Before I go, I want families that are really struggling to know that you're not alone. At The Guided Path, we specialize in supporting families where behavior is really complex. If you're needing more support, make sure you reach out. There's a link down in the description. I'll see you next time.